Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a true elite health masterclass. We aren't just going to look at some surface-level productivity hacks or quick tips for better focus. No, we are going deep. We are going to decode the profoundly interconnected biological systems that govern how our brains age, how we optimize our sleep, and how we achieve peak mental performance. We're looking at the literal, physical architecture of your brain and how the habits you choose every single day physically sculpt that structure.
Now, I want to start by asking you something kind of wild. Can chronic anxiety literally, physically alter the architecture of your brain? There's this persistent misconception in modern American life that stress is just a temporary, subjective feeling, like it's just a fleeting emotional state you get over, but the clinical evidence tells a much darker, much more physical story. As we navigate this era of constant digital overload and attention fragmentation, chronic stress isn't just a mood. It is an active, physical modifier of your brain tissue.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The neurotoxicity of chronic stress. 2. Rebuilding through diet and exercise. 3. Sleep architecture and memory. 4. The science of nootropics. And 5. Mastering the memory palace.
Section 1. The neurotoxicity of chronic stress. To really grasp how to optimize our brains, we kind of have to face some heavy stakes first. Look at this. Between the years 2000 and 2019, deaths from Alzheimer's disease skyrocketed by a staggering 145%. And globally, dementia cases are projected to reach 139 million by the time we hit 2050. This isn't just a statistic. This highlights an absolutely urgent, critical need for us to understand how cognitive decline actually begins, long before a doctor ever gives a clinical diagnosis.
And that decline often starts with something as common as chronic stress. Dr. Helen Mayberg, a world-renowned neurologist, identified this phenomenon known as the stressed brain seesaw. It's exactly what it sounds like. When you're chronically stressed, your brain's fear circuitry gets thrown entirely out of whack. Your amygdala, which is your emotion and threat center, becomes overactive and incredibly hyperreactive. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking area that's supposed to regulate your emotions and keep you focused, becomes underactive. It's a literal seesaw. Your executive control actually shrinks while your fear center expands.
So let's dive into how this actually happens on a cellular level, because it's fascinating. It's called excitotoxic atrophy. When your stress response is stuck in the on position, your body is just constantly pumping out cortisol. This sustained cortisol triggers a massive flood of a neurotransmitter called glutamate. Actually, think of it more like an unregulated tidal wave into your synapses. This overactivates your receptors, causing a massive influx of calcium into the cell. Think of this calcium overload like a massive power surge completely short-circuiting a computer's motherboard. This overload destroys your mitochondrial function, and that leads to severe structural damage. This neurotoxic cascade literally causes the dendrites in your hippocampus and prefrontal cortex to shrivel up, and it severely suppresses the birth of new neurons. Chronic stress is, quite literally, eating away at the biological scaffolding you need for memory and deep work.
Section 2. Rebuilding through diet and exercise. But here is the good news. That damage, it's not a one-way street. We can rebuild it. Physical exercise isn't just about looking good or cardiovascular health. It is a highly targeted neurotrophic therapy. And what's crazy is that different ways of working out act on entirely different brain regions. Aerobic training, like a brisk walk or going for a run, stimulates the release of myokines like irisin straight from your muscles. This travels up to the brain and elevates BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which essentially acts like Miracle-Gro for your hippocampus, birthing new neurons and boosting your episodic memory. Resistance training, on the flip side, upregulates IGF-1. This specifically increases blood flow right to your prefrontal cortex, which powerfully enhances your executive function and processing speed. So, a routine that combines both, that is your absolute ultimate defense against cognitive decline. Of course, if we're sparking all this new neural growth, we've got to feed that network, right? Enter the MIND diet. This is essentially a hybrid of the Mediterranean and DASH diets. It totally restricts neuroinflammatory trans fats and heavily prioritizes neuroprotective foods. Think leafy greens and lots of berries. And the clinical data here is just incredible. MRI scans literally show that adhering to this diet physically increases the cortical surface area in a part of the brain called the inferior frontal gyrus. And that translates to significant, measurable improvements in your working memory and verbal recognition. You are quite literally building a stronger, thicker brain based on the quality of the food you put on your plate.
Section 3. Sleep architecture and memory.
So we're exercising to stimulate growth, and we're eating right to provide the building blocks. But how does the brain actually metabolize all of this? The answer is sleep. And guys, sleep is not a passive timeout. It is a highly active mechanical process. It's an active systems consolidation that happens in 4 vital steps. Step 1. During non-REM slow-wave sleep, your brain actually reactivates the fragile memories you temporarily stored in your hippocampus that day. Step 2. Through the complex coordination of brain oscillations, these memories are physically transferred over to the neocortex for permanent long-term storage. Step 3. As you enter REM sleep, theta oscillations perform what's called synaptic pruning. They actively weaken and delete irrelevant or redundant neural connections so you don't hold on to useless data. And finally, Step 4. The surviving important memories are seamlessly integrated into your broader knowledge networks. It is a hyper-precise save and clean cycle.
And while it's doing all that memory consolidation, sleep is also literally acting as a heavy-duty dishwasher for your brain. We call this lymphatic clearance. As you dip into deep sleep, the fluid dynamics in your brain fundamentally shift. It normalizes your vascular pulsatility and literally flushes out metabolic waste. Most importantly, it clears out the amyloid beta buildup, which is the exact protein directly linked to Alzheimer's disease. And here is where the systems thinking comes in. This entire nocturnal plumbing system relies on a structural protein called astrocytic AQ4, which, by the way, is highly supported by the aerobic exercise we just talked about. See how every single system is deeply interconnected?
Section 4. The science of nootropics.
Okay, so with our solid foundation of stress management, diet, and sleep established, let's look at the highly debated world of botanical brain enhancers, nootropics. The internet is absolutely flooded with biohacker claims about these supplements, so we really have to examine the objective clinical data here. When we compare 2 of the absolute most popular agents, Bacopa monnieri and lion's mane, we see very different profiles. Bacopa actually has robust evidence backing it up. It elevates that crucial BDNF we mentioned, it actively lowers cortisol, and it shows progressive improvement in working memory with really only mild gastrointestinal side effects. Lion's mane, however, it's much more complicated. While it does show some temporary benefits for older adults dealing with mild cognitive impairment, the results in healthy younger populations are highly variable, and frankly, sometimes outright detrimental.
In fact, check out this startling result from the clinical trials. For healthy young adults, concentrated lion's mane actually, quote, causes reduced word recall, increased memory errors, and executive-controlled declines. Yikes, right? This powerfully debunks the myth that all nootropics are just universally beneficial across the board for all age groups. Tinkering with your brain chemistry without understanding your own biological baseline can sometimes introduce major interference rather than actual enhancement.
Section 5. Mastering the Memory Palace. All right, we've protected the brain, nourished it, and rested it. Now, how do we absolutely unlock its ultimate potential? Welcome to the gold standard of memory techniques, the method of loci, more commonly known as a memory palace. This is an ancient technique that leverages our deep evolutionary aptitude for spatial navigation. Instead of just repeating a list of boring facts over and over, you use vivid visual imagination to encode information. You mentally place those facts along an ordered sequence of familiar spatial locations, like walking through the rooms of your childhood home.
And this brings up a fascinating biological divergence in how elite learners actually operate on a neurobiological level. Usually in standard memory encoding, people tend to rely on neural patterns that are very similar to group averages. Basically, they memorize rote data the exact same way everyone else does. But memory athletes, the ones using the method of loci, they utilize highly idiosyncratic, deeply personal, and often totally bizarre mental imagery. This custom imagery creates distinct, entirely unique neural representations in the prefrontal cortex. By making the memory highly specific and weird, they eliminate neural interference. They are essentially carving out a highly specific, customized physical engram right in their brain tissue.
And here is the absolute best part, the most empowering piece of research we'll look at today. You do not have to be born a memory champion to achieve this. A truly fascinating study showed that when everyday individuals, people completely naive to memory tricks, underwent just 6 weeks of method of loci training, their brains fundamentally, functionally reorganized. They developed those exact same distinct prefrontal representations as the elite memory athletes. And it gets better. Those unique neural signatures predicted superior free recall performance a full 4 months after the training ended. You can literally fundamentally rewrite your brain's functional mapping.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to internalize this one reality. Your memory, your focus, your overall brain health, they are not just static traits you're stuck with. They are highly responsive, deeply interconnected biological systems.
Every single time you choose an aerobic workout over sitting on the couch, every time you prioritize deep, slow-wave sleep over doom scrolling late at night, and every time you actively challenge your memory rather than just outsourcing it to your smartphone, you are quite literally architecting your own brain tissue.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on today. We know for a fact that chronic stress and digital overload will shrink your executive control and expand your fear centers if you leave them unchecked. That biological cascade will happen. The only real question is, will you allow modern life to just passively rewire your brain for you, or will you step up and actively architect your own memory palace? The biology is entirely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I highly encourage you to start building right now.